I got home a few days ago, hungry as shit, and absolutely sick of the usual way of cooking steaks. Let it rest at room temperature, season it with salt and pepper, go based butter garlic thyme, let it rest again. Fuck you. I've had that so many times, made steaks like that so many times, every cut you can think of, most grades of beef, and I just needed something different. Because even too much of a good thing, can be overwhelming. Like when you do a bunch of squats at the gym, you can't like squat every single day, maxing out. Well, actually, you can if that's the only thing you do. But the main lesson here is if you do something the same way again and again, it's bound to get boring. So you really do have to switch things up. And that's what I did here because I was a little bit in despair. I was a tiny bit angry. Like, oh, what the fuck? Is this like Sisyphus? I'm just gonna be pushing up the stone all day, every day. And then I realized, no, I literally just made a video on this. How to make boring fucking food not boring. Therefore, I'm gonna use the techniques that I taught you guys in a couple of videos back in this video to make this steak non-boring. So, as you can see here, I'm peeling some garlic cloves. One of them is supposed to be for a sauce later, just to be grated in raw. I actually forgot that. But the other two are for basting, because you can still baste with butter, garlic, thyme, whatever herbs you want. But we do a few things to the steak ahead of that time. Now I'm gonna crush these to release the flavor. You know that's the whole deal. Every single steak video talks about it. What every single steak video does not talk about is making use of the whole cut of steak that you're using. I have a New York strip, which has a big old fat cap. It's what Brits would call a sirloin. A sirloin is what we here would call a rump steak. Um, no, they would call a sirloin a rump steak. We just call it a sirloin. But so the New York strip has a big thingamabob of fat running through it, which can be cut off. And when you cut that off, and when you trim the steak a little bit further, you get, I think, a Manhattan fillet is what it's called. Yeah, you get a Manhattan fillet, and you can trim that further, do whatever to like cope and convince yourself that you're eating a filet mignon. But I digress. So let me get back to the part where I actually make the steak out. Yeah, take out a little bit of butter. Butter makes everything better. Okay, so I got this steak, trying to cover my address. I got this steak from Jones. I don't know how to pronounce the name of this marketplace, but it's $8.33, which is for them honestly pretty expensive. But I think before they didn't even have to used to have a USDA ratings on their beef. They just had like what's it called? And man, they just had like their own imported from Lord knows where. So this is nice to see that they have upgraded to this. And $8 for a New York strip is like it's pretty good in today's economy in Los Angeles. So I'm showing you this over here. It has some pretty nice marbling. It looks almost like a speak of the Brits here, it looks almost like a British steak in that the marbling isn't like a very spotty, just here and there, but it had a nice flavor and it was still good. So I'm cutting off that big fat gap, like I said, to make a Manhattan fillet. But don't worry, this isn't gonna get put to waste. As you can see here, I've not trimmed one of these guys in a while, and so I'm doing it a little bit unskillfully. But it's still it's still pretty easy to do. You just have to take the shit off, man. And underneath the fat layer is a layer of silver skin. Now the silver skin is super tough. It doesn't render as well as the fat. As you can see, I'm taking a little bit of the meat away with it, which is unlucky. But it's worth it in my opinion to have a cleaner, nicer tasting cut. So you can see I'm showing it right over there. What you need to get rid of, it literally does look like silver skin. So after I've gotten rid of all that, I score the steak, which sounds a little bit blasphemous. Hold on, let me make sure. Yeah. Okay, so I take off the silver skin, trying to save as much of the meat as possible, and then I score the steak. Now, scoring does a few things. When it's something like duck breast or chicken thigh, what if? No, you wouldn't like a chicken leg maybe. The seasoning can penetrate further. You create more surface area, so it sears better, it's crispier, and it gives you kind of the illusion almost of a grill pattern. But it's just fun. The main thing is it's just fun. So I'm creating these little cubes on the surface, obviously not cutting all the way through, but you can see I'm gonna use this to get a bunch more of the seasoning through and just have a funner time and use its own fat to sear it actually. But now let's move on to the seasoning. Actually, yeah, the fat cooking in its own fat. You can see I'm slicing up the tallow here. Everyone's always like, "Oh man, I love tallow. Tallow is the greatest," and then they never buy it because it's fucking expensive because the grocery stores have caught on to the trend. So what I'm doing here is making great use of it. These little smaller pieces is like, maybe I should have thrown them away, maybe not. But that big block that was on the end, that's absolutely fucking amazing for this purpose. Now, as you can see, I'm putting them into my Lodge cast iron, cutting up this other piece of fan. That's the good stuff. That's really good stuff is. And I'm crisping them up. And I'm actually, like, I'll be using them as a garnish, right? So it doesn't get wasted. Just because I need to bulk, I need the calories. I know some people will be like, ew, what the fuck, that's just fat. It's cool. It's like, you know when, what's it called? Oh, the pork rind. I think it's like chicharron, something like that. Fucking a lot of Hispanic people do that. That's basically just fat, but rendered out and or skin. So this is pretty much no less cringe, especially if you salt it. Make sure that it's rendered out, which I didn't render them out as well as I could have, but it's mostly there. So I'm using a Lodge cast iron pan, the goats, but I'm taking off the plastic handle. I I wonder when I realized that the plastic handle is on it. Yeah, yeah, here we are. Okay. So here I realize, oh, whoops, I don't want microplastics on my shit. And then I take it off, and then I turn it on the heat. Now here's my squirt steak. I'm gonna be seasoning it with a mixture of it's salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. You can see the fat rendering, which is very nice. Yogurt dip seasoning. So salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, yogurt dip seasoning, and cayenne pepper, and also Aleppo pepper. So this is the biggest thing. There are so many infinite ways to season food that you really don't have to despair because everything from here has been pretty orthodox except for the scoring. So I trimmed it to get a cleaner experience. I scored it, and the seasoning that I'm using is very, very interesting. The Aleppo pepper makes it great. The there's also paprika from, oh yeah, I was supposed to make like a dig at Spanish versus Hungarian paprika because whenever I hear whenever I hear like binging with Babish or whoever, like Joshua Weiss from these fucking bigger YouTube channels, they go like, put in a sprinkle of Spanish paprika. Make sure it's the Spanish stuff, guys. You can use Hungarian, but the Spanish is just better. I just want to like fucking slap, because it's not. Because they're just lying to you. They've never had actual authentic Székesfehérvár kibaszott legfinomabb paprikája. I don't know. They've never had it, probably, because they're fucking cringe lords. Okay, let's see what tomfoolery I'm doing with this steak. So, here's the fat, rendering out, doing its own thing. Now I'm gonna show you the seasoning. So I'm taking out the little bits of crispy off fat, and I'm gonna be showing you how I apply the seasoning to the meat. And meanwhile I'm doing this, think about the flavors. Salt, fat, acid, heat. We're getting the fat from the fat. We're getting a bunch of salt, obviously, but we're getting the heat. So what's missing? Acid. So we're gonna be expecting to get some acid later. As you can see, rendered more than enough fat to cook the beef in. Oh, there's a nice dog. It's like 6 a.m. Why is there a woofer outside? I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's really cool. So I'm gonna be sprinkling this guy on. Whoopam. I don't know why there's such a big delay. Yeah. So you can see here. I would even probably season from a bit higher to get even distribution, but the cutting board was small, and so I didn't want the spread. I also just forgot that that's a tip that you can do. So that is a tip that you can do, season from higher to get more even distribution of the salt and other ingredients. You can see I'm making sure to season all over, and this already looks much better than the classic SPG steak that gets so boring after just a few attempts. So I'm rubbing that in very nice. You want to be rubbing it in very well to get it between all the crevices. I'm sure you can see that. I open it up a little bit at the end. So here's a big thing. Here's something that you'll want to be able to do. The pen is on, I think the pen is on a good heat now. Cast iron is very deceptive because it holds heat well, but it doesn't heat up very evenly and it takes a while to heat up. So I think it's hot enough here. I want you guys to listen to the sound of this when I try to put the steak in. I see this and I'm like, nope, not hot enough. So I put it back in the pan and I go back to seasoning. And I think, yeah, it's here off camera where I rub it into the holes between the cubes because I realize that's the thing you can do. So I wait a little bit more, and I even started this maybe too early, which may have caused it to cook unevenly a little bit. Like I may have wanted the pan to be a little bit hotter, but listen to the sound now. You can see. And then my ADHD takes over, I move it a little bit. You can rest assured, right, that it's not gonna mess up the steak, especially if it's this thin, if you just move it around, if the pan is pretty evenly preheated, and even though it's not as hot as I would have liked, it's still relatively hot, right? The pan is still relatively hot, and evenly heated because it's been on there for a while. So you can see this. You can see how all the spices are getting browned. You also saw that I ate a little bit of the crispy fat to show that I'm not a bitch, and it's like, oh yeah, it's a nice keto snack. And now I'm just getting it around to coat it in all the tallow, and then I'll leave it alone for a little bit. So if I were to make a steak the usual way, I wouldn't score it. I wouldn't use this many seasonings, and I wouldn't make a pan sauce out of it because, as you can see, I'm gonna be making a really cool sauce from this. I'm gonna be putting in some garlic and the butter, basting it, but I'm not gonna be done there because I'm gonna be making a sauce, as I said. And also, one of the big reasons I'm using cast iron, it's very safe, right? Because things burn a lot less in cast iron, right? And I'm not getting the best sear I want here, so I'm adding a bit of olive oil, which isn't a seed oil. It's good for you. A bunch of unsaturated fat, but very minimal processing. So the reason I'm using cast iron is to preserve the fond and the ingredients in the pan a little bit longer. And you'll see that the sauce doesn't end up being burnt. Maybe it is, maybe the pan is just like black to contrast or something and I haven't realized. But that's the impression I'm under, and it didn't taste burnt whatsoever. So here is getting very nice, and then here I add the butter. And I also add some of the butter foil or paper, which is very anabolic and good for your testosterone, I'm sure. I let that all melt, and then I just do what chefs are meant to do. I baste this guy like there's no tomorrow. For cooking times, I haven't measured the times I cooked a steak in like a very long time. You kind of just like play it by ear. You do kind of want to feel it, right? Rare, medium. Oh, what the fuck? Okay, please don't do that test. Okay, I haven't done this test in approximately like 5 years or like four, a couple of years. I haven't done this test basically ever since I started going to the gym. So, the test is supposed to be like, this is rare, this is medium rare, this is medium, this is well. Yeah, that works kind of well. Once you get to a somewhat low body fat, this starts to feel like well done. Or once you start to like develop your thumb area a little bit, this starts to feel like well done. So maybe don't be doing this test. This used to be an accurate way of like telling how to cook steaks, but just like it should feel springy. If it's medium rare, it should feel springy. Now I'm gonna add some honey right over here. This is to balance out the sweetness, because honey and butter is a very good combination, and honey and spices are a very good combination. You can see the sweet potatoes I'm serving this with, which is also a bunch of nutrients, but color-wise goes very well. So here's where I'm arranging them, because odd numbers look better than even. So I don't know if I missed the lemon, right? I think maybe I added some off camera. If I didn't, that was a big mistake, but I'm pretty sure I added some lemon to this off camera, because to balance out the salt, fat, acid, heat. You can see that beautiful brown liquid. You can see the nice toasted pieces of garlic. You can see me pouring that over. And here's the final plating. So this looks much more like something that you would see at a restaurant. and much less like something that you would cook at home, right? With the even uniform browning and the herbs on top, whatever else, which is super nice. Again, it's a great recipe, it's a classic for a reason, but when you've made it so many times, it just gets really boring. You need like in the gym, you need self-limiting variations. This is like the self-limiting variation of the steak, and that is just different. It's like West Side, you can't just max out on the same thing every time, right? You have to be rotating variations. So this is what I'm showing you how to do here, and it actually looks really good. Like it actually looks really good, and I was surprised by the taste because sometimes food looks better than it tastes. But I was surprised pleasantly over here. You can also see how I very nicely dropped the camera in trying to show you the steak. There's the doneness. I would call that mid-rare, definitely. It just, you can see it's a tiny bit uneven because of the heating of the pan and also because of the scoring. It's kind of bound to happen. It was a worthwhile trade-off in my opinion because the crust was unreal, the flavor was unreal. Thank you very much for watching. If you learned something from this, scroll down to the description. I do have a paid product where I teach you more of this kind of stuff as well as nutrition. So culinary stuff and nutrition stuff intersected, very nice. If you got any kind of value from this, I'm very glad. Please leave it in the comments below. And remember, we may not have a lot of time in this world, but you do have enough. Thank you.